The Ooze. 40 years of comics, cartoons, and movies, and nobody has ever settled on where the green stuff actually came from. In the original Mirage comic from May 1984, it's almost insultingly simple. A truck swerves to avoid a boy crossing the street. A canister of unidentified radioactive waste bounces free, smashes a glass bowl of 4 baby turtles out of the kid's hands, and everything tumbles into a storm drain together. No company logo, no scientist, no explanation of what the substance was for or who was hauling it. Later continuities each invented their own answer, and none of them match. The 2003 series made it an industrial accident, the alien Utroms, hiding on Earth behind a front company called the Techno-Cosmic Research Institute, produced the mutagen as a waste byproduct while building a transmat teleporter to get home. The 2012 series threw that out entirely and made mutagen a substance native to Dimension X, brought here deliberately by the Krang because Earth's physical laws let them refine it. The 2014 film went a third way, calling it a medical serum engineered for cellular regeneration. So the Ooze is simultaneously alien waste, alien technology, human medicine, and unlabeled garbage. Every version is canon somewhere. The franchise's single most important object has 4 mutually exclusive origins, and no story has ever tried to reconcile them. The last thing they touched. The most quoted rule in the entire franchise is that mutagen turns you into whatever animal you last made contact with. It's the mechanic that explains Bebop the warthog, Rocksteady the rhino, and Toka the snapping turtle. It also collapses the second you apply it to the 4 characters it was invented for. Splinter was a rat who touched 4 turtles, so by the rule he should have become a turtle-rat hybrid or something turtle-shaped. Instead he became a humanoid rat, a rat that grew taller, gained opposable thumbs, and learned to speak English. The turtles touched a rat, and they became humanoid turtles. Nobody in any continuity becomes what they touched. What actually happens, consistently, is that everyone becomes a bipedal, human-sized, human-intelligent version of themselves. The mutagen isn't an animal-blending agent at all. It's a humanizing agent, and the franchise has never once said so out loud. Some versions try to patch the hole. The 2012 series added a rule that mutagen draws on recent DNA contact, which produces the same contradiction with extra steps. The 1990 film simply declines to explain anything. It's a mechanic that exists to justify the villains and quietly breaks on the heroes, and 40 years of writers have collectively agreed not to look directly at it. Splinter's 2 lives. There are 2 completely incompatible Splinters, and both are considered definitive by millions of people. In the 1984 Mirage comic, Hamato Yoshi is a man, a Foot Clan ninja in Japan, in love with a woman named Tang Shen, who keeps a pet rat named Splinter in a cage. The rat watches him practice ninjutsu every day and copies the movements through the bars. Yoshi is murdered by Oroku Saki as revenge for the death of Saki's brother Nagi. The rat escapes, ends up in New York's sewers, and is mutated. Splinter learned ninjutsu by imitation, from a cage, as an animal. In the 1987 cartoon, that entire arrangement is deleted. Splinter is Hamato Yoshi. Saki frames him for attempted murder of a clan leader. He's exiled to New York in disgrace. He lives in the sewers among rats, and the Ooze turns the man into the rat. The romantic subplot is gone. The 2003 series went back to the pet rat version. The 2012 series went back to the man version and named him Hamato Yoshi outright. The 2014 film split the difference. Nobody has ever explained which is true, because there is no true. The franchise has run both origins in parallel for 4 decades and simply lets you pick. The turtles who never grow up. They are teenagers. The word is in the title, on every toy box, in every theme song. In the first Mirage issue, they're stated to be 15 years old, mutated as hatchlings roughly 15 years earlier. That was in 1984. It is now more than 4 decades later, and they are still teenagers, in every ongoing continuity, permanently. This isn't unusual for comics, but Turtles make it strange in a way Spider-Man doesn't, because the franchise keeps insisting on biology. Red-eared sliders, the species most artists draw them as, routinely live 30 to 50 years in captivity, and some documented specimens have passed 70. If mutations scaled them to human size and human intelligence, did it scale their lifespan too? Nobody knows. The handful of stories that jump forward are wildly inconsistent about it. The 2007 film shows an aging, weary Splinter, but the Turtles unchanged. The 2003 series' fast-forward arc launched them a century into the future, to 2105, where they're still young because they time-traveled rather than aged. The Last Ronin, IDW's 2020 miniseries, finally shows one turtle as a genuinely old man, scarred, gray, and slow. It's the only story that treats their aging as real, and it had to end the world to do it. The Fifth Turtle. In 1997, a live-action series called Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation introduced Venus de Milo, a female turtle who had supposedly been in the same bowl as the other four when they fell into the sewer. Splinter, the show claimed, simply never noticed her. She washed away separately, was found and raised in Chinatown by a shinobi master named Mei Pie-Chi, and grew up practicing a mystical variant of the art. Co-creator Kevin Eastman helped develop the show with Haim Saban. Co-creator Peter Laird hated it. In a 2012 blog post, Laird called the concept of a fifth turtle a weak, facile, creatively bankrupt idea, and while he controlled Mirage, he enforced a hard rule against female turtles that reached into licensing approvals for other companies' projects. Director Kevin Munro, working on the 2007 film, was reportedly told there was to be absolutely no mention of Venus, not even as a joke. So a character with a full origin story, a television series, and an action figure line was effectively deleted from the franchise she belonged to, and for roughly 2 decades her name went unspoken in official material. She has since been allowed back into comics, with Eastman publicly supporting her return. The unexplained part isn't where she came from, it's how Splinter lost a child and never mentioned it. The red bandanas. Every child who has ever owned the toys knows the color code. Leonardo blue, Raphael red, Donatello purple, Michelangelo orange. It's how you tell them apart, and it's been that way since the 1987 cartoon. It is also completely absent from the source material. In Eastman and Laird's original Mirage comics, all 4 turtles wore identical red bandanas. There was no in-universe reason offered, and no in-universe reason has ever been offered since. The real explanation is production, not story. The black and white comic didn't need color differentiation. The tone was grim, and 4 identical masks reinforced what the early books were actually about. Not 4 distinct personalities, but a single anonymous strike team raised for one purpose, which in those first issues was killing the Shredder. When Playmates Toys developed the action figure line and the animated series came together, 4 indistinguishable green figures in red masks was a merchandising problem. The colors were assigned commercially. What no story has ever addressed is the in-world version of the question. At some point in the sewer, somebody decided who got which color. Was it Splinter? Did they choose? Was there an argument? Some later comics gesture at it with a throwaway line. None of them commit. The most recognizable design choice in the franchise has no canonical origin at all. The Renaissance book. Their names are Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo, 4 Italian Renaissance masters, given to 4 mutant turtles by a rat living in a sewer. The standard explanation, repeated across most continuities, is that Splinter found a discarded book on Renaissance art in the storm drains and named his sons from it. Take that at face value for a second. It requires a rat who has just gained sapience to read, in a language that is not his first, from a waterlogged book he happened to find in a drainage system, and to select 4 painters rather than 4 Japanese warriors, 4 virtues, or 4 anything else connected to his actual heritage. Splinter is a Japanese ninjutsu master who names his children after Italian sculptors. No version has ever explained the choice, only the mechanism. It gets stranger in the versions where Splinter is Hamato Yoshi, a literate adult human, because then the book is unnecessary, and the naming becomes a deliberate aesthetic decision by a grieving exile. The 1990 film handles it in one line and moves on. Eastman and Laird have been open that the real reason was a joke. The names sounded absurd next to Ninja Turtles, which was the entire point of the original pitch. The in-story justification was reverse-engineered later and has never been examined since. What's under the helmet? Oroku Saki has died more times than almost any villain in children's entertainment, and the franchise has never explained how he keeps coming back. In the 1990 film, Splinter drops him off a rooftop into a garbage truck, and Casey Jones pulls the lever on the hydraulic compactor. That is an unambiguous, on-screen crushing death. In the 1991 sequel, The Secret of the Ooze, he is simply alive again, more heavily scarred, back in command of the Foot, and then exposed to raw mutagen to become Super Shredder, who then brings a dock down on his own head and dies a second time. The comics are worse. Mirage's City at War arc has him decapitated. He returns anyway because the Foot's mystics resurrect the body using thousands of worms. Later stories introduce the Tengu Shredder, a demon so old that Orokusaki was merely its most recent vessel, which retroactively means killing the man never mattered. The 2003 cartoon revealed the armor contained a neutron named Karai, an alien war criminal piloting a human-shaped shell. So the answer to what's under the mask is, depending on the story you're reading, a scarred Japanese man, a demon, an alien squid, or nothing at all. He has never stayed dead in any continuity that ran long enough to try. The Foot Clan's true age. The Foot are introduced as a criminal organization, ninja for hire, running the New York underworld for Shredder. Then the franchise keeps quietly making them older and stranger, and never settles on what they actually are. Mirage's version began as a straightforward parody of Marvel's Hand, complete with the same faceless disposable soldiers. Almost immediately, the clan acquires mystics, robed figures capable of raising the dead, which they demonstrate by rebuilding a beheaded Shredder out of worms. The 2003 series pushed further, introducing the Ninja Tribunal and a backstory stretching roughly 1,500 years, in which the Foot were founded not by criminals but by a demon called the Tengu Shredder that was defeated and sealed away, with Orokusaki's clan being the corrupted remnant. Under that framing, every street-level foot ninja the Turtles have ever knocked unconscious belongs to an organization built around an imprisoned entity. No continuity has ever reconciled the two versions. Are the Foot a mob with costumes, or a 15th-century-old occult order that runs a mob as a side business? Stories switch between the readings depending on what tone they need that month, and the number of members is equally unpinned. Sometimes a few dozen, sometimes an army that can flood a city block. The organization has no consistent size, age, or nature. Karai's blood. Karai is the second most important figure in the Foot, and nobody agrees on who her parents are. She debuted in Mirage's City at War in 1992 as the leader of the Japanese branch, sent to New York to end a gang war after Shredder's death. Notably not his daughter at all, just his successor. The 2003 cartoon made her Shredder's adopted daughter, taken in as an orphan, loyal out of gratitude and increasingly torn about it. The 2012 series performed the biggest reversal in the character's history. Karai is Miwa, the biological daughter of Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen, stolen as an infant by Orokusaki after Shen's death, and raised believing Yoshi murdered her mother. That makes her Splinter's actual child and the Turtles' adoptive sister, an arrangement no other continuity has used. The 2007 film left her allegiance deliberately unfinished. Her closing dialogue implies she intends to resurrect the Shredder, and director Kevin Munro has said the planned sequel would have followed that thread, along with Michelangelo joining the Foot. The sequel was never made, so Karai is a successor, an adopted daughter, a stolen daughter, and a woman midway through reviving a dead warlord, and the version that would have resolved the most interesting of those was cancelled. Krang's missing body. The 1987 cartoon's second biggest villain is a talking pink brain who rides around in a mechanical android torso, and the show tells you almost nothing about how he got that way. What it establishes is that Krang was a warlord in Dimension X, that some incident stripped him of his body, and that he was banished to Earth as punishment. What that incident actually was is never depicted, never described in detail, and never revisited across 8 seasons. The one concrete detail the series ever offers comes from the episode Invasion of the Krangazoids, which indicates his original body was reptilian, meaning the pink brain is not what his species looks like, but what's left of something else. Who removed it, whether it was surgical or a punishment ritual, whether it could be reversed, and why exile to Earth specifically was the sentence are all left blank. The android body he spends the series in was built for him by Shredder as part of their alliance, which raises its own question. He ruled a dimension, lost a war, and had to wait for a human ninja in a sewer to give him limbs. The 2012 series ignored all of it and reinvented the Krang as a hive-minded alien race. The original Krang's actual body remains, canonically, a blank. Dimension X. It's the source of the Technodrome, the Krang, the neutrinos, the rock soldiers, the triceratons in some versions, and in the 2012 series the mutagen itself. And the franchise has never defined what it is. Is it another universe with different physical laws? A distant region of this one? A pocket space? The 1987 cartoon treats it as all three depending on the episode. Travel there is achieved by a portal that Krang can open more or less at will when the plot requires and cannot open at all when the plot requires that instead. Time inside it runs differently sometimes. Its geography is inconsistent. It contains breathable planets like Bellerophon. It contains the neutrinos' pastel-colored world where teenagers drive hover cars. And it contains vast stretches of nothing. The 2012 series took the different physics reading seriously and used it to explain why the Krang needed Earth to refine mutagen at all. The substance behaves differently under our physical laws. That's the closest anyone has come to a rule. But it also raises the obvious problem: if the laws are genuinely different, the turtles shouldn't be able to breathe, stand, or survive there, and they routinely do. Dimension X is less a place than a permanent narrative escape hatch, and no writer has ever been asked to draw the map. The Technodrome's power. A mobile fortress the size of a small mountain, spherical, armed, capable of burrowing through bedrock, flying, and functioning underwater and in space. The 1987 series ran it as a recurring problem for 8 seasons, and the entire plot engine of the early years is that it keeps running out of power. What it actually runs on is never adequately explained. Across various episodes, it needs to recharge. It needs specific crystals. It needs energy siphoned from Earth's power grid. It needs a fuel source Shredder has to steal. And the requirements change to fit whatever the episode is about. Where it was built, by whom, and how a banished exile with no body came to own it are never addressed either. Its fate at least got an ending. In Turtle Trek, the finale of the 8th season, the Turtles wreck the main engines and strand Shredder and Krang in Dimension X permanently, where the Technodrome comes to rest on the planet Bellerophon. That's one of the few genuinely closed doors in the franchise, and it took 8 years and roughly 180 episodes to shut it. The unresolved part is everything before. A doomsday machine that spent nearly a decade as the show's central threat and never once had its own construction explained. The Rat King. Of every recurring character in the franchise, the Rat King is the one the writers have most deliberately refused to explain. His first appearance in Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles presents a bandaged, almost mummified man living in an abandoned park among the city's rodents, controlling them with something that isn't quite established as magic and isn't quite established as anything else. He has no real name. He has no stated goal. He has no backstory. Mirage later gestured at one with the Pantheon, a group of ancient beings each holding dominion over a species, with the Rat King revealed as a scarred hospital patient who was chosen to rule the rats. But chosen by whom, and why him, is left exactly as open as before. The 1987 cartoon reduced him to an unusually intelligent homeless man in the sewers, again unnamed. The 2003 series went in a direction nobody predicted, and made him a clone of Agent Bishop, driven by an alien abduction to prepare Earth against extraterrestrial threats. IDW's version returned to the Pantheon and cast him as the Pied Piper of Hamelin, which folds a real folk legend into his origin without clarifying it. 4 continuities, 4 Rat Kings, and not one of them tells you his name. Bebop and Rocksteady's real names. 2 street thugs are mutated into a warthog and a rhinoceros, and become the most recognizable henchmen in 1980s animation. They appear in dozens of episodes, they talk constantly, and across the entire run of the 1987 series, nobody ever says what their names were before they were mutated. They are Bebop and Rocksteady from their first appearance onward, named after music genres, with the human identities underneath left permanently blank. It's a small gap that becomes conspicuous the longer you look at it, because both characters are given personalities, histories of petty crime, and a clear pre-existing friendship. Everything except identity. The 2012 Nickelodeon series finally filled it in, and the answers came from an entirely new pair of characters rather than a revelation about the old ones. Bebop is Anton Zek, a professional thief, and Rocksteady is Ivan Starenko, a Russian arms dealer and antiquities collector. In that version, they're given the names by Michelangelo mid-fight, and Zek objects to his. Those identities have since been widely adopted, including in later comics and the 2016 live-action film. But they were invented roughly 25 years after the fact for a different show. The original 2, the ones most people picture, went their entire run as men with no names. Baxter Stockman's body. No character in the franchise has been physically destroyed and rebuilt more times, and none of it is ever medically explained. Stockman starts as a human scientist, the inventor of the Mousers, robotic rodent hunting machines that the Foot repurpose. From there, the continuities diverge violently. The 1987 cartoon merged him with a housefly in a transporter accident, and Baxter Stockman became a giant fly for the rest of the series. The 2003 series took the crueler path. Every time he fails Shredder, he loses another part of himself, and across 4 seasons he's reduced piece by piece to a mechanical body, then a head, then a brain in a jar wired into machinery, still talking, still scheming. He is dismantled as punishment and simply keeps existing. Nobody explains what's keeping him alive or where the line is. His race changed too. White in the Mirage comics and the 1990s cartoon, black in the 2003 series and most versions since, with no in-story acknowledgement, which is a production decision the franchise has quietly absorbed. And the Mousers themselves raise the deepest question about him. A man who can build autonomous hunter robots in a basement is, by any measure, one of the most gifted engineers on Earth, and every version of the story has him working for gangsters. April O'Neil's missing backstory. The Turtles' closest human ally has been rewritten more thoroughly than any other character in the franchise, including the villains. In the 1984 Mirage comics, April O'Neil is a computer programmer working as an assistant to Baxter Stockman, a technician, not a journalist, and she meets the Turtles while fleeing Stockman's Mousers. The 1987 cartoon made her a television news reporter in a yellow jumpsuit, which became the default version worldwide, and dropped the programming entirely. Her family, her upbringing, and how she came to be so unbothered by 4 mutant reptiles are handled differently or not at all in each version. Some continuities give her a sister named Robin, some don't. The 2012 series went furthest by making her part Krang, her father experimented on by aliens, her own DNA partly mutagenic, which explains her psychic abilities and also means the ordinary human character isn't human. The 2014 film built her a completely new history, in which she personally rescued the baby turtles from a laboratory fire as a child and released them into the sewer, making her responsible for their existence. Her race has shifted between versions too. There is no baseline April. The one constant across every continuity is the yellow, and even that was a costume decision made for television. The Healing Blood. The 2014 film introduced a piece of lore that quietly breaks its own plot, and the film never addresses it. The mutagen in that continuity was developed by April's father and Eric Sachs as a regenerative compound, something that repairs organic tissue at the cellular level. After the laboratory fire destroys all the research, the turtles' blood becomes the last remaining source of the substance on Earth. That's the entire motive for the third act. The Foot capture 3 of the 4 turtles, and begin draining them, because their blood is now worth more than anything else in the world. Except Splinter was mutated by the same compound, in the same accident, and is standing right there. If every milliliter matters enough to justify a citywide operation and the capture of 3 targets rather than 1, leaving the 4th mutant behind is inexplicable. The film also never explains why the mutagen produced humanoid reptiles when it was engineered as a burn treatment. Sachs openly speculates about it on screen rather than knowing, which is a screenwriter admitting the gap through a character's mouth, and the healing property never comes up again in the sequel. A substance established as capable of regenerating human tissue exists in 4 bodies walking around New York, and the franchise drops it. The pizza economy. They eat pizza constantly. It is arguably the single most referenced thing about them, and the logistics have never survived a moment's scrutiny. Start with the money. 4 mutants living in a sewer with no employment, no bank accounts, and no legal identity order takeaway on a near-nightly basis across every continuity, and the franchise's usual answer is to not show the transaction. When it does show one, most famously the 1990 film's Delivery Driver, who takes the money from a manhole and complains about the tip, it raises more questions than it settles, because someone with a job and a route now knows where they live. Then there's the biology. Turtles are, depending on species, omnivores or near herbivores. Red-eared sliders in the wild eat plants, insects, and small fish. There's no established reason mutation would grant them the ability to process dairy, wheat gluten, and cured pork in volume, and no story has ever suggested their digestive systems changed. The 1987 series pushed it into absurdity with toppings including jelly beans, chocolate sprinkles, and marshmallows on the same slice. It works as a joke and as merchandising. As a fact about 4 reptiles surviving underground with no income, it has never been given even a token explanation. How New York never notices. 4 2-meter-tall talking reptiles have been fighting an organized crime war on the rooftops of one of the most photographed cities on Earth for 40 years, and the general public has never found out. In the 1987 cartoon, they drive the party wagon, a bright, heavily modified van with a battering ram on the front, through Manhattan traffic in daylight. In multiple continuities, they own aircraft. They fight ninja armies on public streets, destroy vehicles, and appear on April's news broadcasts. And the world resets to ignorance every time. The excuses offered are thin. Some versions rely on foot cover-ups, some rely on the city being too jaded to react, which is a joke rather than a mechanism. The 2012 series eventually let the secret break and had to invent an in-universe explanation for containment. The problem sharpened enormously as the franchise aged into the era of camera phones. The 2014 and 2016 films are set in a New York where every bystander is filming, and the story still requires that no usable footage ever circulates. The 2016 film at least acknowledges it by having the Turtles publicly save the city and then deliberately step out of frame so Vern Fenwick takes the credit. That's a plot device, not an answer. The lair that can't exist. Their home is a functioning apartment inside the New York sewer system, and no version has ever explained how it's possible. Depending on the continuity, it includes electric lighting, working televisions, computers, arcade cabinets, a fully equipped laboratory for Donatello, a dojo with wooden flooring, hot showers, and in several versions a vehicle bay large enough to house and launch a van. The power has to come from somewhere. The most common handwave is that Donatello spliced into the city grid, which is plausible for a lamp and considerably less plausible for a machine shop, and which the utility company would notice as unbilled load. The space is the harder problem. Real sewer infrastructure is pipework and pumping stations, not cathedral-sized chambers, and where the franchise does gesture at an answer it invokes abandoned subway stations, of which New York genuinely has several, though none with a spare vehicle ramp to street level. Then there's the water. Sewers are not dry, quiet, or clean, and mutant biology doesn't fix mold or methane. The 2012 series and the IDW comics both moved the lair into disused transit tunnels, which is the most honest attempt anyone has made. It still doesn't explain the electricity bill, the ventilation, or the van. The stories that were never finished. Some of the franchise's mysteries aren't in-universe at all. They're plot threads that were cut mid-sentence by cancellation. The largest is Image Comics' Volume 3, published from 1996, which put the Turtles through permanent feeling mutilation and then handed the Shredder's identity to Raphael, who took command of the Foot. By issue 22, he'd lost a three-way struggle for control of the New York clan to a figure called Lady Shredder, and in issue 23 he was her prisoner while she, as the book put it, painted the town red. Then the series stopped. It ceased publication in 1999 with the entire arc unresolved and Raphael still captive, and readers waited nearly 2 decades before writer Gary Carlson and artist Frank Fosco returned to produce issues 24 through 26 and finally close it. The 2007 animated film was a box office success and set up a sequel around Karai reviving the Shredder. The sequel was never greenlit, so her last line remains a permanent cliffhanger. The next mutation was cancelled after 26 episodes, with Venus's story barely begun. Across 4 decades, the franchise has abandoned nearly as many storylines as it has finished, and for most of them, the explanation isn't mystical or scientific. It's just that the money stopped. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.